The air outside the school gates was thick with the scent of wet asphalt and exhaust fumes from the buses idling along the curb. It was late afternoon, that dim, heavy hour when the sun hides behind low clouds and the world seems muted. Students poured out in clusters, their laughter and shouts bouncing off the walls, filling the street with the easy chaos of freedom. He was in the middle of that stream, my son, backpack slung over one shoulder, shirt untucked, his hair sticking up in the way it always did after soccer practice. He was scanning the crowd for me, I imagined, or perhaps just thinking about the snack waiting at home. That was when she stepped forward. She didn't belong there, not in this sea of uniforms and harried parents. Her heels clicked against the pavement, each step measured, her long coat swinging slightly with the wind. When she stopped, just beyond the metal gate, the noise seemed to dull around her. Her eyes, cold, deliberate, found my son's face with the precision of a predator. And when she smiled, it was without warmth. "You don't know me," she began, her voice low enough to be personal but sharp enough to cut through the background noise. "But I knew your father very well." The words hung there, uninvited, and my son froze mid-step. She leaned in just enough to make sure no one else could hear, her perfume threading through the damp air. "I was someone he loved," she said, "or at least someone he told he loved." Confusion flashed across his face, a frown pulling at his mouth. She studied him, almost savoring the moment before she struck again. "Your mother knows," she continued, her tone flattening into something harder. "She's known for years, and still, she let you live under the same roof with him." The sentence was a match dropped into dry tinder. I could see it in the way his shoulders stiffened, in how his grip on the backpack strap tightened. The din of the schoolyard receded, replaced by the rush of blood in his ears, the thudding in his chest. The space between them seemed to contract, trapping him in a bubble where only her words existed. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. Each syllable was laced with something heavier than volume, intent. Her expression never wavered. Her lips pressed into a faint curve that didn't reach her eyes. She had come here for this, to plant something poisonous and walk away. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Questions clashed and tangled in his head, each one too big to form. Was it true? How could it be? Why would his mother? The ground beneath him felt less solid, the cold of the pavement somehow seeping through his sneakers. A bell rang somewhere inside the school, and students jostled past, their chatter oblivious to the crack that had just split his reality. She straightened, smoothed her coat, and gave a tiny nod as if closing a transaction. Then she stepped aside, letting the tide of bodies carry on around her. He didn't walk away, he ran. The backpack thudded against his spine, his breath coming in sharp bursts. Wind and rain stung his cheeks, but it was the hot burn in his eyes that blurred his vision. By the time he reached the end of the street, the tears had already broken loose, mingling with the sweat and the drizzle, and he clutched the straps tighter, as though they were the only things holding him upright. He didn't kick the door open. He let it slam behind him with the force of a body that had run out of places to put its fear. The house jolted, his backpack hit the floor and skidded sideways, a wounded animal sliding to a stop. In the kitchen, his mother looked up from the sink, hands still wet, dish towel paused midair like a flag in no wind. He stood at the edge of the room, cheeks bright with the kind of red that comes from rain and panic together. For a heartbeat, he was just a boy home after school. Then his mouth found a shape and the room had to learn a new language. "Did you know?" he asked, and the end of the sentence stumbled over itself before regaining its footing. "And still let me live with him." The words were not shouted. They were thrown, neat, heavy stones landing in a still lake. Silence is not empty. It has weight. His mother placed the towel down with care, the way you set glassware in a cupboard you share with a clumsy roommate. Her eyes traveled the short distance between them and did not retreat. He saw the timeline of her day, emails, errands, a recipe forgotten and remembered, go out like lights on a grid. "Who told you?" she asked, voice low, buying time, not for denial, but for breath. He didn't answer. The name would not help. He stepped closer, shoes squeaking faint on the tile. "Did you know?" he repeated, the question now a rehearsal for a verdict. She nodded. Once. No word tried to soften the shape of the gesture. The kitchen shifted in that instant. Walls leaned. Objects redefined. Fridge a vault. Table a witness stand. Window a way out that opened onto nothing. He blinked like someone coming up too fast from underwater. "How long?" he said. He couldn't keep the years straight in his head. They had stopped dividing themselves neatly into summers and school terms. "Long enough," she said, and winced at her own vagueness. She corrected herself. "Since the spring before your last birthday." A date fell into the room and broke into pieces. "I wanted to tell you," she added, "but I kept thinking." She stopped. Because the thought she had kept broke now under the light. "I kept thinking a good father in your eyes was better than the truth in your hands." "I don't know if I was wrong." "You were," he said, too quickly, then too slowly. The two adverbs wrestled in his throat. He wanted his anger to be a single color. It refused. "You let me trust him," he managed, the word trust landing between them like a glass they could both see but not touch. "You let me sit at dinner and laugh at his stupid jokes and tell him things and—" He ran out of verbs before he ran out of breath. She took a step toward him and then stopped, unsure of the currency her body had left. "I was trying to protect you," she said, "from what grown-ups do to each other when they are proud and hurt. I thought if I held it between us, it would stop spreading." She looked at her hands as if she might still be holding it there. "I think I made you carry the weight anyway, just without the name." He went to the counter, bracing himself as if the laminate could give him something solid. The ordinary things accused him by being unchanged. The fruit bowl. The crooked magnet shaped like a cow. A note with a grocery list in her quick, slanted hand. Milk. Cilantro. Bandages. Now hilarious and obscene and exactly as important as it had been an hour ago. The world refuses to sort itself when you need it to. He tried again. Why did he get to stay? It wasn't a legal question. It was architectural. Why had the house not evicted what was broken? Why had the floor kept pretending it was a floor? She swallowed. "Because he is still your father," she said, and then immediately wished for a better answer, one that did not sound like a law she hadn't voted for. "Because I thought we could fix it while keeping your foundation steady." Her voice thinned, like a thread pulled too hard through a button. "Because I was tired of losing things. Maybe I wanted to choose what I lost," he said, and the sentence surprised them both by being wise and unkind in the same breath. The room tightened. Outside, someone dragged a trash bin over concrete. A harsh sound that felt like punctuation. She gripped the towel again without using it. "Do you hate me?" she asked. Not because the answer would change her, but because she is a mother and needs to know the temperature before stepping into the water. He shook his head, but the gesture was unconvincing even to himself. "I don't know what I feel," he said, and then, with a sudden cruelty only a child in pain can deploy, "about either of you." He regretted it as it left his mouth and refused to take it back. Because pain wants witnesses, not edits. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, the smallest surrender. "I will tell you everything," she said. "Not today. Today I will tell you enough. He and I are not what we were. I wanted you to have a childhood that didn't know that." She looked up at him, and he saw, to his horror, that her eyes were wet. He had not come here to make her cry. He had come here to place something down that had been pressed into him like a brand. "I am sorry," she said, "for choosing the picture over the frame." He wanted to slam something, knock a chair sideways, make a sound that matched the split inside his ribs. Instead, he backed away, the careful reverse of a person leaving a nest of broken glass. "I need," he said. And the sentence did not finish itself. He turned and walked toward the hallway. Then ran because running is the first language a body remembers. His bedroom door hit the jamb with a crack that made the house flinch. In the kitchen, his mother's hands began to tremble, lightly at first, then with a rhythm. She stood at the counter and reached for the edge to steady herself. Then didn't. The towel slipped to the floor. The kettle, forgotten, clicked itself off. She remained there, upright by decision alone, while the light from the window carved her face into planes that looked like resolve and were just as much grief. The apartment met me with a silence that had posture. Jackets on the hooks, shoes aligned too neatly, the faint lemon of a freshly wiped counter, everything arranged as if to prove that order and peace are not synonyms. Lena was at the table, elbows on the wood, hands folded to stop their shaking. She didn't stand. She didn't say hello. She lifted her eyes and gave me the kind of look that moves furniture. She came to the school. She said, no preface, no pronouns to soften the impact. The sentence traveled across the room and sat down between us. He ran home. He asked me if I knew. Her mouth made a tired shape. I told him the truth. For a moment the old instincts tried to light up, explain, minimize, import a context to make the weather seem accidental. They died fast under the light of her face. Where is he? I asked. In his room, she said. He doesn't want to see you. She pushed a glass of water toward me and I hated its generosity. You should try anyway. The hallway was shorter than I remembered. It has that trick hallways have on bad days, lengthening and narrowing at the same time. I stopped at his door the way people stop at the edge of a grave, not because they will fall in, but because the ground deserves respect. I knocked. 3 gentle taps that embarrassed me with their hope. It's me, I said, as if that were a qualification and not the problem. Nothing. Then the scrape of a chair. Then his voice, flat and older than it was yesterday. Don't. 1 syllable. A new border. I'm going to sit out here. I said. I won't talk unless you want me to. I slid down the wall and found the old dent in the baseboard my suitcase had made years ago when we moved in. Across from me, the framed photos marched down the hall. First day of school haircuts. A Halloween where the costume fell apart before the candy did. The beach picture where all of us were sunburned and pretending we weren't. The images looked curated by a stranger with good taste. Time changed shape. The apartment breathed around me. The low drone of the fridge. A neighbor's laugh thudding through plaster. The kettle clicking on and then off again in the kitchen. Lena moved like a person doing small, exact tasks so the big, impossible one could take its time arriving. I tried to remember how to be a father when the door is closed. All the rules I used to be proud of. Listen first. Name the feeling. Don't rush to fix. Felt like coat hooks in a house with no coats. Half an hour passed. All 3. I said nothing. Sometimes love is the discipline to stop measuring. At some point his shadow pulled under the door. Why? He asked, voice muffled by wood and pain. The word had no referent and contained them all. There isn't a good reason. I said, there are excuses, and I'm not going to use them. He didn't move. Did you love her? He asked. Each consonant pushed like a box too heavy for the person carrying it. I told myself I did. I said, but if love makes you lie to the people who trust you, it's something smaller with better marketing. The floorboard closest to the hinges creaked. He was closer, or I wanted him to be. Did Mom know the day of my game? He asked. When you were late and said the subway broke. Yes, I said. The memory shelved itself in that moment under a new label. She knew. She still came. She cheered for you. He laughed once. A broken sound that wasn't laughter. And I cheered for you when you finally got there. A pause. I told Max you had the best job because you were important. Another pause. I told people good things about you. I heard you, I said, and the admission felt like stealing. I didn't deserve any of them. The door opened the width of a dictionary. He stood there with his chin set the way mine gets when I am trying not to cry. His room behind him looked like a documentary about a boy trying to be a scientist, a half-built model. A poster crooked with pride. A pile of clothes that had picked a corner and started a colony. He kept one hand on the knob like a man ready to retreat. Why did you do it? He asked again, this time demanding architecture, not poetry, because I wanted to feel like a different person without doing the work to become one. I said, because I confused attention with love and risk with courage. Because I was selfish. The word landed like a chair scrapped across tile, accurate. Ugly. He blinked hard. You could have told me. he said, which was not true and absolutely true. You could have told me you were going to break everything so I could move my stuff first. I should have told you many things. I said, I can start by answering what you ask now, and by not asking you to fix any part of me. He looked down at his socks like they might know better than either of us how to proceed. At school, he said, she said Mom knew and let me live with you anyway. I don't know who to be mad at. He swallowed. I don't know who to call Dad anymore. The sentence found its place in my chest like a blade and then, slowly, like a key. You don't have to call anyone anything today. I said, you can call me by my name. You can call me nothing. I will still be here. Will you sit out here if I close the door? He asked. Yes. He considered, then closed it, gently this time. I stayed. The wall was hard and unforgiving. It felt appropriate. Lena walked past once, placed a glass of water beside me, and kept going. Hours or minutes later, the door opened again and a hand emerged. Small and stubborn, holding a paperback he loved when he was 8. Read, he said, not looking at me. I read. My voice felt rusted at first and then found the old path through a forest we had not visited in years. He didn't open the door wider, but he didn't shut it, either. Between the jamb and the hinge, air moved. At the end of the chapter he said, again, and I began. I did not reach for his name. I reached for the next sentence. The hallway accepted us. A man with no defense left and a boy deciding. One page at a time. What to do with him. They scheduled it for a Thursday because grief is less theatrical in the middle of the week. Lena booked it, sent the address, and did not dress the message with hope. My mother approved the time as if she were approving a building permit. Go, she said, sit, listen, do not argue with the air. I said yes because I am learning that obedience can be a form of love when it stops being a form of convenience. The office was on the second floor above a florist. The smell of damp stems and cut green drifted up the stairwell. Inside, the light was warm in a way that looked deliberate, as if someone had measured the wattage against the human nervous system. A sofa lived under the window with a throw folded into exact rectangles. A chair for the therapist angled just off-center. Neither superior nor subservient, a round clock held its white face up like a witness and let each second declare itself. Somewhere a small machine breathed, air purifier, fish tank, something that insisted on the room's ability to continue. He sat at one end of the sofa, backpack at his feet as if he needed to be ready for extraction. I sat at the other end, palms open on my knees so my hands would not pretend at usefulness. The therapist, Mara, she said, mid-40s, soft sweater, a ring that looked worn in instead of polished, sat with a notebook on her lap and a pencil she did not touch. We're going to go slow, she said, as if she had read the hallway we had walked through to get here. And when we can't go slow, we will stop. She looked at him, not me. You get to lead the speed. He shrugged in the language of boys who have learned the price of words. Mom said I had to come. He said, I'm here, that was the contract. Mara nodded, as if he had offered a thesis. That's enough tonight, she said, being here is work. She turned to me, you'll answer questions if he asks them. You won't ask him any. Is that clear? I nodded. She didn't begin with history. She began with what the body knows. Feet flat, she said, look at something that doesn't need anything from you. He stared at the plant on the bookcase with the attention of a scientist and the anger of a son. I looked at the clock until the seconds softened at the edges. Tick, breath, tick, breath. The room arranged itself around the rhythm. Tell me what the week was like. Mara said to him, not like a reporter collecting facts but like a builder inspecting materials. He cleared his throat. Kids at school heard. He said, because she came. The pronoun did the work of a name we all knew but did not invite into this room. Some said stupid stuff. His mouth made a quick hard line. Like what? Mara asked. Gentle. He shook his head. She let it go. What did your body do? She asked instead. Hot, he said. Ears. Hands. He flexed them as if reliving the heat. Did you tell anyone to stop? I told Max to stop. Did he? He said sorry. Then he asked questions. Did you want to answer? No. Did you? He looked at me and then away. I said my dad messed up. He said, the sentence landing like a piece of furniture set down carefully so it won't scratch the floor. Mara nodded and let the silence do its job. Then she turned to me. Say what he said, she instructed. Say it in your mouth. I looked at him. My dad messed up, I said, and heard how the grammar protects me from the full weight. Again, she said, without borrowing his permission. I swallowed. I messed up, I said. I betrayed your mother and I broke our house. The words were not noble. They were heavy, and the room allowed them. He kept his eyes on the plant. Why? He asked, as if the room itself would penalize me for softening the answer. Because I wanted to feel like a different person without doing the work to become one. I said, because I mistook attention for love. Because I was selfish. The clock ticked its approval of specificity. His jaw shifted, a small tectonic plate moving under the skin. They laughed, he said suddenly, voice too loud for the room and then immediately too small. At lunch, two of them laughed, not even at me, around me, like I was a TV. He sucked in a breath that didn't go anywhere. I wanted to throw my milk. I wanted to leave. I didn't. Mara didn't look away. Where did the feeling go? She asked. Into my neck, he said, gripping the collar of his shirt. Into my stomach. What did you tell yourself to keep sitting? I told myself to wait until the bell. He swallowed. I counted to 100 and then to 100 again. He stopped. The room held. Say to him what you wish those boys had said. Mara told me, not an apology, not a discourse. Words a boy could have used in a cafeteria. I turned my body so I was facing him but still leaving space. That sucks, I said. I'm sorry you had to sit in that. My voice shook and I let it. You didn't deserve 1 second of it. He nodded once. A single credit offered to a sentence that had paid exact change. Mara folded her hands. Now say what you wish your father had said before any of this. She said to him. He was quiet a long time. The clock performed each second like a soloist. He lifted his head and looked at me the way a person looks at a closed door. I wish you'd said you were going to ruin things. He said, so I could move my stuff. His voice cracked on stuff. A child word for a boy trying to be a man. I wish you'd said it wasn't my fault. The last word tumbled out like a confession. It is not your fault. I said too fast, then slower. It is not your fault. I felt foolish saying a sentence that obvious and necessary. He blinked, and for an instant I saw the toddler who used to check my face for weather and the child at the gate yesterday who learned storms can be announced by strangers. He put a hand to his eyes as if embarrassed by the light. And the first tear slipped out, the kind that startles a person who believes they are finished with crying. He tried to catch it with his sleeve and missed. 2 more followed, then a small, helpless sound that forced him to decide between swallowing it or letting it escape. He chose escape. It's embarrassing, he said, and now the flood made its argument. They said my house was fake. He swiped at his face with anger at the wetness. They said I was stupid for not knowing. He folded forward, elbows to knees, and the backpack slid toward him like a loyal animal. I wanted to touch him and didn't. Mara put a box of tissues on the table between us as if placing a neutral country on a border. Let your face do what it needs. She said to him. To me she said, do not narrate this. He doesn't need your words to have his feelings. I held the edge of the sofa with 2 fingers like a person preventing himself from falling off a roof. When the storm in him eased to weather, Mara asked him to name 3 things in the room he could trust. He said, the clock. He said, the plant. He looked at me a long time and said, the chair he's sitting on. And a terrible and excellent laugh broke out of me at the accuracy. It is sturdy, he added, and I nodded, grateful for furniture. We didn't solve anything. That wasn't the job. At the end, Mara asked if we could sit for 60 seconds without speaking. He and I both agreed too quickly and then had to do it. Silence laid itself over us without malice. He leaned back into the sofa's corner. Not toward me, not away. I let my shoulders drop for the first time in a week. The clock said 1 minute and made it believable. Outside, in the stairwell, the smell of cut stems returned. Cleaner now, like a new habit. We walked side by side, not touching. On the sidewalk he adjusted the strap of his backpack and didn't run. We waited for the light. Cars moved, people lived. When we crossed, he didn't walk ahead of me. He didn't fall behind. The space between us was still there, but it had lost its blade. It felt like the kind of distance that can be measured and, with enough Thursdays, revised. A month is not long enough to forget. It is long enough to discover which silences bruise and which ones heal. We chose a cafe half a block from the school, the kind with a chalkboard menu and a bell over the door that pretends every arrival is a small celebration. I got there early and sat at a table with a view of the street. The chair angled, not facing the door like a supplicant, not turned away like a coward. I ordered 2 hot chocolates because coffee would make the conversation faster than it could bear. When he pushed through the door, hair damp from the mist, his backpack thumped against his hip in a new, taller rhythm. "Hey," he said, the word tested for cracks. "Hey," I said. We stood for a second in the awkward ceremony of 2 people who used to know exactly what to do with each other's hands and now trust time more than muscle memory. He sat opposite me and slid his notebook out like a shield he was willing to share. "I have math," he said, which was both topic and truce. We worked the problems the way we had been taught in the therapy room, slow, exact, no perfumed language, just numbers and their stubborn honesty, a string of fractions that demanded common denominators, a word problem about 2 trains that refused to meet. He wrote with care, the pencil gripped too tightly, then loosened, then tightened again when the arithmetic tried to outpace his breath. I pointed at a line. He erased without sulking. We found the missing step the way you locate a sock that fell behind a radiator, by feeling the space, not by blaming the hole. Around us, the cafe performed comfort without bragging, a milk frother sighing, a barista calling a name with the softness reserved for regulars, the doorbell chime insisting beginnings are still available on a weekday afternoon. We did not mention the visit at the gate. The door slammed a month ago. The clock that had counted our Thursday. We let the past sit in a chair at another table and pick at a pastry it didn't deserve. "What about practice?" I asked, and he told me about a move he almost landed and the kid who always shows up late but runs the hardest laps. We analyzed a match we had both watched separately, a tie that felt like a win because sometimes effort rescues a number. He described a goal scored off a deflection, his hands shaping its path in the air. And for a moment his face forgot to be measured. I let the moment pass without trying to own it. The hour learned to breathe. When the cups were empty and the notebook less defensive, I looked at the window instead of at him and said, "I'm going to start something next month." The sentence arrived like a package whose weight you understand before you open it. "There's a community center near my mother's. They run a weekend program fixing bikes for kids who don't have one or whose parents don't have time to repair them." I signed up for the training. I kept my voice as ordinary as a bus schedule. "I do not trust," Val said in a trumpet key. He drew a small square in the margin and shaded it in. "You don't really fix things," he said, and the sentence could have been a jab. It wasn't. It was geology, layers naming themselves. "I know," I said. "I'm learning. I thought I could start with chains and brakes. They make sense. You can see when they work. And if I get good at it, I'll stay. If I don't, I'll stay and get better." I let a breath out. "I wanted you to know I'll be somewhere on Saturdays that isn't hiding." He nodded like a man hearing a weather report for a city he might visit. "Max's dad coaches Little League," he said. "He yells a lot but he shows up. People say he means well." He tapped his pencil twice. "A metronome for an undecided thing. Do you have to be good to help?" "No," I said, "but you have to be there when the door opens." I didn't add what felt too obvious to trust the air with. That being there is a skill I am training like a muscle. Like a heart. He made another square, lighter this time, left it unshaded. He looked at the window. Not at me. "Maybe I'll come watch," he said, trying the word maybe on for fitness. "If Mom says it's okay. No challenge in it, just the new law. If she does," I said. "Or you can not. Either way." There will be a bike with a bent wheel waiting for Hans. The image arrived as I spoke it and stayed, a small frame turned upside down. The crank spinning, the chain catching, the gentle knack of discovering where friction hides. Time changed shape. He closed the notebook, gathered the pencil and the eraser with a competence that made him look briefly older than his face. He pushed his chair back, the legs announcing themselves against the tile. We stood in a clumsy duet. I did not reach for him. He did not step away. At the door, the bell rehearsed its small joy. He held the handle and looked past my shoulder, into the cafe's practiced warmth. "I'll see," he said, 3 syllables that were not a promise and not a refusal. His mouth tried out a fourth and decided against it. He tugged the backpack onto one shoulder, the strap twisting, and let it twist because not every correction needs to be made in public. We walked to the corner together because the directions required it and because partings feel cleaner at intersections. Cars idled. A woman hustled a stroller through the crosswalk with the determined kindness of someone who has learned the city's pace and keeps her own anyway. The light changed. He took one step off the curb and then looked back. "I'll watch," he said. "Less maybe now. More test. I'll see how you do." It was the smallest revision and the biggest. "Okay," I said, and did not smile like a man cashing a check. "I'll be there." He crossed. He didn't run. The backpack settled into its place like a conclusion that might be rewritten. I stood on my side until the car behind me tapped its horn, impatient with the idea that streets can sometimes be used for thinking. Back home, the apartment was still the apartment, unfussed by our attempt at a new grammar. I took down the list from the refrigerator: batteries, rice, paper towels, and wrote beneath it in smaller letters, Saturday, bikes. I didn't underline it. I didn't draw a star. I let the ink sit there and be ordinary. Before bed, I spoke the sentence I was finally able to carry without theatrics. I do not promise to get everything back. I promise each day not to lose more.